tagline here of Return to Nature. Hope you're doing well. It's a rainy day here in Los Angeles area. I'm going to be teaching a workshop this Sunday in Topanga, California. So if you're in the area or you know anybody who's interested, let them know. So today we're going to talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about. So I received a whole bunch of questions from good people out there. I really appreciate your interactions. I feel like I'm learning so much on Instagram just from all the collective pool of information out there. So I thought as people join, I'm going to play a little song, which is actually a Shimshai song, so you may know it. And if you know it, just take a deep breath and sing along. Thanks, friends. I see Marawak is on there, and I just want to thank you, brother, for inviting me to play music with you. It's really been inspiring. It's helped me to just push through my own fears of playing music. So I made a bunch of mistakes there, but I don't care. And, it only gets better from there, and it's just about putting our hearts out there. Chief Brizzy starts off with a really powerful question about the subconscious mind, and I think this is a huge question. I don't feel like in our education system we learn enough about mind and how mind works. There's basically two ways of perceiving mind, and its compartmentalization, and one of them is from Jungian and Freudian psychology, which was borrowed largely from the Vedantic and the Sanskrit tradition. So I really prefer the idea of the Sanskrit tradition and the Vedic or the yogic tradition, and there's some correlations. So in our modern psychological model of our institutionalized world, which obviously has tremendous amounts of flaws, tremendous amounts of misperception, tremendous amounts of pain, anxiety, and unconscious behavior, as we call it. There's basically four aspects. So the first is the conscious mind, and that's the self, the ego, the sense of knowing that we all have. And the second is the subconscious mind, right? There's three, right? And that's where things are kind of stored but available to us. And then the unconscious are sort of things that rule our behaviors from beyond our awareness or our knowing. And so that was sort of the Freudian method. And then Jung took this concept of the unconscious and realized that first of all, that's where the shadow work is. So that's where a lot of therapy is needed, right? We want to become conscious of the unconscious patterns and behaviors in our lives. And then also he expanded it to make it into the collective unconscious, right? So then the Freudian or the Jungian idea of archetypes within the collective unconscious started to bridge us from a Western mentalized perspective to an Eastern perspective of the spirit world or the shamanic presence or alchemy and shamanism, and Jung spoke a lot about alchemy and shamanism, wrote profusely about it. And within that is the unconscious being the map for everything else in the world. So I think it's Candace Pert who said, nature is your unconscious mind. And so as we behave, as we embody behaviors, as we embody psychological patterns, as our culture and our ancestral lineage instills these behavior and cultural patterns into us, some of those become unconscious behavioral patterns. Currently, we're in a position where we're seeing a sort of, for example, the fake news phenomenon back and forth is a form of cultural gaslighting. So these are internal psychological states, unconscious behaviors that have bled into the cultural matrix, and it's causing division and identity politics and things like this. And really the goal and the way I see it is, to the degree that we can have an internal individual spiritual apocalypse where our ego is eclipsed by our soul, let's just say simply. If we can have that internally and go through that transformation within ourselves, that's the degree that it will not manifest as physical apocalypse outside. And of course, many religions, approximately 50% of the world believe that there needs to be this nature-based apocalypse in the world to wake people up to produce the delivery. But of course, I believe that that can be channeled into shadow work. So Connie Zweig has 2 books. One is called Facing the Shadow, one is called Romancing the Shadow. Jung brought in this map of shadow work, and what it is basically, how are we ruled by patterns in our lives? How do we look at what's repeating itself over and over and try to deconstruct why and the beliefs that we hold around those patterns? And what are the archetypes? What is the symbols that we either dream of or experience in nature? What are the things that we feel called to? What are the things that speak to us? And that very much is close to the yogic perspective. Cool, Salix, good to see you. Internal spiritual apocalypse, where ego is eclipsed by the soul. And of course that's like a very condensed meme to say that, to the degree that, and this is where alchemy, right? So lead into gold, right? Lower chakras, base desires, into transformation, third eye consciousness, whatever you want to call it. So when we take this unprocessed, unconscious content and we don't judge it and we don't fear it and therefore we don't repress it into the closet, right, then it does not unconsciously act. And I like the, hello Elena, welcome forward. And so when the alchemist, right, turns lead into gold, is actually an internal spiritual metaphor of taking that which is unprocessed and then dusting it off and cleaning it off and looking at it and purifying it, right, and into the conscious mind. So I feel like the goal of life is to expand our conscious mind to eat up our unconscious, right, to expand awareness so that we do not embody the patterns that cause us or other people suffering. So within the yogic tradition, of course, you have manas, buddhi, which makes ahamkara. And so manas is mind, same concept of what we call consciousness, which I think is a grave mistake. Conscience or self-awareness maybe is an option, but when we call the mind consciousness, which means that we are conscious of ourselves, we lose the Vedic understanding that consciousness is actually the thing that subsedes all, right? That spirit, the spirit behind all things, right? The spirit that moves in all things, the one universal consciousness that's under or above or through everything equally, right? And that's sort of the spiritual world, or the Jungian collective unconscious or unconscious. Right, Salix says alchemy is a psycho-spiritual process. It's not necessarily a process of trying to make physical gold. And to the degree that we mistake the alchemical process for making physical gold, we will then manifest suffering and pain and materialism and greed and all of those manifestations into the society as we seek the external gold instead of the internal gold. So manas, right, and then buddhi is the intellectual mind, the part that says this is good or this is bad, right? Discernment. And discernment is not judgment, right? So in the yogic understanding, there's a very big difference between judging things, right, versus discerning between whether they serve or do not serve, whether they are healthy or non-healthy, these things. And then ahamkara is the self, the entire sense of self. Ahamkara. which means the I maker, actually, the I creator. So the sense of self, right? The sense of an individual self. And this is, right, like, know thyself. Self-realization is about understanding and deconstructing the individual self, because our individual self is a small island, and it's mostly manifest out of ego, sense of meanness, right? I just saw a meme with Instagram and somebody snorting a line of likes, and this sort of addiction to serotonin and dopamine that we experience. So Salix Root says, deeply internal, making medicine in the alchemical tradition can often ignite similar stages of the medicine making process into our psyche. Dissolution of the plant can lead to dissolution of the ego. Everything in alchemy is a metaphor for the internal process. So when you do the work, the physical work in the laboratory, it is a reflector as to work being done within yourself. Nettle, for example, ruled by Mars, right, helps us as we purify nettle, as we transform nettle. It transforms those Mars qualities within ourself: communication, forcefulness, stinginess, right? As you transmutate that plant into a higher manifestation, you're also transmuting parts of yourself. So it's as if the plant is within you and the jar is within you, and all of that is as above, so below, as within, so without. And so everything happening in the vessel, in the alchemical crucible, this is the alchemical crucible, and the world is also the alchemical crucible. Tat Twam Asi, right, from the Sanskrit tradition, that thou are, right? Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am consciousness. Atma and Brahma are one, right? The Atma is the individual, and Brahma is consciousness, the collective. And so Kelsey Jones Sylvia says, extraction, expansion, transformation. Yes, or summed up by Paracelsus, right? A spagyric, right? Speos and geos, I believe it is. And what that means is separation and recombination. So when you're making a spagyric medicine, which I think I actually have one here, cordyceps, bear root from Duane, Red Feather Farms. Here we go. Kajiwa spagyrics is some people that came to a class a couple weeks ago, and they gave me this wonderful spagyric medicine, which is really tasty and beautiful. And so what's forgotten in spagyric, speos, geos, is also purification in the middle of that. So separation, purification, recombination. That's what transmutation is. See, the alchemists were like rappers. Separation, purification, what is it? I lost it. Not much of a rapper. But anyway, let's dig into some of these questions and see what happens. Wow, I've gotten some really deep stuff. Okay, so Yerba Mama says, what things stir my soul? Oh, Salix, really cool that you know of their company. They also gave me this, Alchemist. So this really smells very good. So Kajiwa, look them up. I'm sure they're on Instagram. This one smells kind of sandalwood-like. May all things be purified. So what things stir my soul is a huge question. And what really is stirring my soul lately is growth and travel, and sitting deeper with plants, and living off of my hands, and making food, and hanging out with community, and also really getting into this sense of community service. I feel like in the last couple of years I've really struggled with, how to sort of bring in the level of empathy into this world in a way that's actually productive and actually does something. And so community service is seeming to give a sense of life purpose that keeps me going. And things that stir my soul are basically at this point things that give me a reason to live versus wonder what this all is about and wonder why I'm alive and what I'm supposed to do and all of those really hard questions. The little threads in life guide us, right? And so I'm constantly looking for those signs and those symbols, those ways in of feeling life purpose. And so, of course, plants are a huge factor in that. Openness, compassion, togetherness. I feel like I've been broken down into some really basic qualities that I think everyone would agree on. Being there for each other, always being able to pick up the phone and call people. That really stirs my soul. it really brings me a sense of like, wow, we're in this, we're in this together. What really stirred my soul is the other day posting that thing, just about like connecting, getting together, and it was like 300 comments, and I saw all these connections happening, and people who I had spoken to individually being neighbors, and connecting, and I feel like the only possibility of a chance that we have for transforming this culture or surviving is to find the others, to connect with people who care about nature, ecology, plants. So fulfilling any part of that feels like the number one thing that stirs my soul. And of course, then the vision of living in a yurt is really stirring my soul. I want to live in a yurt. I want to raise a child in a yurt. I want to, have a beautiful, happy community around me. So that's what I'm going to be working for. Rivka Bear says, baristas are better at empathy than Zen monks sometimes. I'm glad to have one. You mean you have a personal barista? So, I agree that the hardest work is not meditation and going up on the mountain and hiding from everyone. The hardest work is interacting and serving people. For a long time, I didn't know if I just wanted to be a monk and go live in an ashram. And I realized that it's harder for me to go out of my way to consider other people, be it they're homeless or people in jail or people who've been hurt and traumatized and all those things, and seeing my lack of ability to empathize with all that and really trying to push through that. And I feel like in the everyday life is a chance when those things really have to purify us, and like, for example, I'd walk past a homeless person having gone to, the health food store buying these things. I'm not rich, I don't have a lot, and I'd walk past a homeless person, and then sit there and think, like, why can't I just give them an apple? And there's like hundreds of people walking past this person spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on food, and they can't just give the person a jar of peanut butter. So it brought me to understanding the situation and how tuned out we are, how numb we are as a society, that we can walk past those kind of things every day and never just offer a hand up. And so, I've been giving people apples or dates or whatever it is, and, spending 5-10 minutes with them and just having a conversation. And that's really giving me also a sense of getting out of my own ego's way, like, I'm not here to be all about myself. I want to serve. I want to try my best to understand and to empathize with other people. And because that's the desperate race to, survive for all of us. Like, if we continue in the trend of cutting each other out and dividing and shaming and blaming and other siding, then we're going to have a very divided society, which I feel like is going to lead to some sort of civil war. Race wars, civil wars, whatever it is, wall wars. We're at a point in history where I feel like things are really heating up to where people will be in the streets in no time soon. And so how do we wish to be in the streets? What are the principles that we can carry into the streets? An eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. Gandhi and Martin Luther King were examples where, violence begets violence. And so we should just remember all these things. In humility we grow. Fucking men. And I'm trying my best. And also, I'm super open. So if anyone wants to tell me what's wrong with me or tell me how stupid I am or what I did wrong, just talk to me. I'm open. Just request civil conversation. That's really it. Let's see if I can get back to these questions. Alright, so thanks for that question. Your boy Henry says, peace, love, and understanding. So, first of all, peace is something that we have to strive for even when we do not attain peacefulness. There are all times in all of our lives where we do not act peacefully. We have anger, greed, jealousy, insecurities, all these things come up. But that doesn't mean we are bound to be stuck in that way. And when we continue to try to open ourselves up, when I continue to try to open myself up, there has to be another chance at trying to be more peaceful. So I think this is a goal. It's not an easy thing to achieve, constant peace all the time with everybody, no matter what. But that's why we're here. And so love, of course, there's individual love and there's cosmic love. And I feel like we're all in a threshold of trying to understand how individuated love doesn't become jealousy, insecurity, possessiveness, greed, or lust. but it becomes a freeing love, an open love, a caring love, a considerate love, an empathetic love, and then principles. And I feel like what I didn't have in my life, and what I feel like talking to many people we don't have, is training as far as having healthy relationships and love. And it's taken a lot of time to consider what that looks like, and values with contracts. I almost see it as like, what democracy is supposed to be when you sit and write an amendment to a bill and you all agree on it. I feel like that can help with love, getting on the same page. What are our goals? What are we intending? How do we communicate best? What are your needs? What are your wants? What are your triggers? What are your shadows? Just getting that all down, even if it's on paper, so that we can have compassion. And compassion, of course, and understanding seem to go, together. And so in my life, when I don't have understanding, then I don't have unconditional love, and therefore I don't create peace with others. And so, yeah, Be Healing says, loving without expectation of an outcome. This is the great work and the hardest work, and I feel like the more we purify that unconscious, right, whatever it may be, the traumas from our childhoods, the patterns in our lives, the anger, the jealousy, then we can love with less and less expectation or visiting needs on others. And this has been a great lesson in my life, and I'm still seeking to get better and to keep going. Keep going. Thank you, Salix. Let's see, another question. Loving flow state. This is a great one, but unfortunately the question gets cut off. So loving flow state says, confidence. How do we still have insecurities, and how to grow from out of them? So we all have insecurities. Sometimes we all have the parallel insecurities. Underlying some of our insecurities are things like how most of us were born in a hospital and instantly ripped from our mother. So that brings a huge abandonment issue right out the bat. We, in our modern culture, because we live from a conscious mind mentality, we don't understand the unconscious or the subconscious. We don't honor, it's not honored that hurts, to be ripped from your mother as an infant. It's not something that the infant becomes conscious of when they're 20 years old. It's something that causes a certain trauma in that moment. And wherever there's trauma, there's huge left or right turns. And until we get resolution through those, we live out of those fears or broken soul parts. And so confidence comes from, I think, self-acceptance. And there's a huge balance between, and I see on social media, the revolution in body image, the revolution in self-love. And what is the difference between self-love and egotism? Self-love and self-aggrandizement. And within confidence, I don't find any confidence in self-aggrandizement. I hope that you all can see, if you compliment my guitar playing or whatever, I don't want it to be about that. I hope it moves you. I hope it inspires you. I hope it helps you grow. But it's not about patting me on the head, And so the only confidence that I can find, or the only self-knowing that I can find, is knowing that I, just like you, am right in the middle. I'm right in the middle, right? I'm not anything special. I'm not anything terrible. I'm a human with my flaws. I'm a human with my heart on my sleeve. I'm a human with some talents that I've cultivated, right? And so is everyone else, and they fit together, and that's what creates a community. And I love Stephen Buhner's quote, it's better to be a first-rate yourself than a second-rate someone else. And so we all struggle with confidence, and we all struggle with insecurities, and this is really a beautiful thing. But try to remember that behind that is this observer consciousness that's sitting there going, yeah, confidence and insecurities, the monkeys on the seesaw. And that's the purification process, is to try to witness those ups and downs without judging them, without shaming ourselves, without telling ourselves it's stupid or wrong, or blaming ourselves for not being good enough. All of those things are just toxic thoughts, And so I think growing out of them first comes out of not having a level 2. So level 1 is you feel sad, and then level 2 is that you feel sad that you feel sad. So instead of just coming from the place of like, I'm sad, I'm having a sad day, I'm having a low energy day, maybe I should take a nap. It's, I'm having a low energy day, and therefore I'm not good enough, and I'm going to lose my job, and everybody hates me, and blah, 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 blah. That is like, slow that down, right? And then just go, you know what, I'm having an insecure moment. Can I breathe? Can I breathe through this, and can I witness my insecurity? Or I'm feeling confident for this certain thing. Well, don't let it become egotism, you know? And we all have strengths and weaknesses. We all have gifts. We all have benefits to the community. We all have, that's why trade skills exist. Not everyone's going to be a master shoemaker. Not everyone's going to be a guitar player. Not everyone's going to be, interested in herbalism in the same direct way. And that's when we come together and when we build community, that's what's going to give us resilience. In ecology, that's what we see. Nature has diversity, and that diversity allows the strength, right? The shared collective to grow. So I think in American culture, we went through the age of egotism, and we went so far into the age of egotism that now everybody's a superstar and a supermodel, and yeah, that's cool, but now it's about deconstructing it back into like, how do I serve others? How do I integrate myself within the greater whole? Not how do I make this more and more about myself? If that's the goal, then good luck when you're losing your body, when you're dying, So we have to go deeper than, how is this about me, right? It's also, how is it about how I affect others? How is this about what vibe am I putting out? How is this about, am I serving others? And what is my intention of service? Do I want to be pat on the head? Do I want notoriety? Why is my Instagram growing? I have no idea. Am I doing something beneficial? Do you want to hear about plants? Blah, blah, blah. Why do you like more selfies? Why do you make more likes on selfies? These are all questions that I think our Instagram and social media is a crucible of observing the psyche, the mass psyche. And to understand it is very hard. So keep on working on yourself. And confidence and insecurities are like, shit and piss. They don't fulfill you. As Aldous Huxley says, gratuitous grace. So confidence is graceful, but it doesn't actually, it doesn't really make a difference, And then the reverse is also true. So I'm seeing a lot of comments here. So let's stop and I'll scroll up and read some of these wonderful thoughts. Rivka says, accept and acknowledge them, relate to the others via understanding, have fun with them, and learn one's lessons. Amen. And also admit when we're wrong and, try to grow and do the necessary steps for redemption, however much we can. I think we all hurt others, we all get confused, we all say things we don't mean, we all yell and scream, and I think that's the most vulnerable and the most human parts of ourselves, that there's not space for healing there. You know what I mean? We're all suffering in silence over some of those things. And so how do we learn those lessons? How do we transform ourselves? And how do we accept and acknowledge without attaching, Because attachment to anything is also traumatic. Isabel says, hey, that is basically from the Bhagavad Gita. I'm not sure what you're thinking, but I'm also thinking of maybe you're referring actually to some other comment where, so in the Gita, right, it says, serve without the attachment to the fruits, and I think that's a really important principle. Like, for example, I thought about, so I started teaching foraging classes in 2010. I've probably taught about 1,500 classes, and I have no idea who did what with it. I have no idea what happened. I know some people, and I know some things, and some people come back, but like out of, probably 10% of that I've seen again, I have no idea what that does, and it's really not my responsibility. It's just serve and try to help people connect to plants. Keep your head down, keep working, and who cares about the rest, None of us are perfect yet. We are perfectly imperfect in our imperfect perfection. Mugwort Ma, this is a really cool question. Can I share one of my dearest plant stories? Well, what comes to mind is so I grew up playing in nature. My mom was always gardening. She always grew plants. I remember coming home from school and just tulips and all these plants, bleeding hearts, all these plants in flower, and just being so mesmerized by it. There was a garden in the backyard, and next to there was a sandbox, and then out in the near the farm, which used to be my family's. I didn't even know when I was growing up. But Ed Atkins, the neighbor, had a huge farm, and my dad built a tree house in black locust trees. And I remember like once a week, 1 week a year, it would just reek of this beautiful black locust smell. And they were all outside of the windows of this little tree house. And so that was kind of my area to play. And what I found that I would always play with plants, and one of them that I really played with a lot was pokeweed, and partially because it had those red berries, and I would get stains on my fingers, and it was really interesting. And I used to actually use them like for my GI Joes and my Ninja Turtles and other toys. Like I'd squirt blood on them, right? Put a berry on there, and it'd be like, oh, it's a wound. My wrestling figures would get all wounded from pokeberry ink, and I remember so vividly one of the earliest plant memories I have is taking the pokeweeds. I remember there was a huge multiflora rose bramble, and it was like the first time I took clippers from the garage, and I started clipping out a little shelter in there, and it was rounded, so I made an empty area and moved all the twigs out of there with the thorns, and there I would sit. And I remember one time cutting a pokeweed stem. I didn't know what it was at the time, but for whatever reason, I sliced it in half. I made a cross section because I wanted to look inside. And when I opened it up, that vision is so clear in my mind because it has these chambers, it has these like ribs. And I remember just marveling at, like, what the hell is this? And I also remember the smell so deeply. So that really brings me back to, my lucky interaction with plants, I think largely stimulated by the fact that my mom loved nature and loved plants, and it was seen as normal, and she gardened, and that just became a normal thing to play with plants. So if any of you are parents out there or wanting to have children, I think those are really important, to give children free playtime, let them play with plants, teach them about the poisonous ones, and then let them see, let them smell. I don't know very many stories of children who poison themselves out in nature. It doesn't happen as much as you would think. Kayla D says, instead of saying I'm working on my life, I'm working on myself. I'm working on my success. Replace work with loving. I'm loving on myself. I am loving on my life. I like that. And also, work is never done. And so so in alchemy, it's called the great work. The spiritual purification is called the great work. And it is kind of a spiritual work here because there are forces of light and darkness that are battling for whatever, human consciousness or the future, or so that trabajar, right? In Peruvian and Ecuadorian and Colombian and Brazilian shamanism, they call shamanism as la trabajar, which is the work. And so I totally agree. I am loving on myself, and I am loving on my life. And I'm also working on my life, and I'm also working with you, and I'm also working on myself. And the work never ends. And when this life is over, I will fly away home. That's what that song's about. That's a Ben Harper song. Work is never done. It's a good one. Stevie C. Nature, unity through diversity, integration of facets shapes a whole. Yes, interlocking parts, right? Or as Eric, Stacking Functions likes to say, stacked functions, right? And these interconnected. So I think first of all, Rumi, right? Even for all thousands of years, the sun has never said to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. And I think about a flower, and I think about a bee, and I think about how neither of those species are jealous of the other one. They are interconnected. They're interlocked. And so the flower never thinks, gosh, I wish I was a bee. And the bee never thinks, gosh, I'm so jealous of you. You're such a pretty flower. But they integrate together, and they're totally unique. They have different aspects, different attributes, different capacities, different things they can do, different things they can't do, and yet they're interacting together. And the strength of the individual, the goal here is that the strength of the individual benefits the strength of the collective, and the strength of the collective benefits the strength of the individual. And if we're willing to give a certain amount of compromise to open ourselves up to the group, the empathy of group, right? And work through the trouble of empathy, of group. Group empathy means everybody's got an opinion and everybody's insecure and everybody gets jealous and everybody gets mad and everybody has bad days and good days. And can we hold the empathy of the group to kind of work through those things, right? That's unity and diversity. Earthwalk Medicine says, quieting our loud perspective, raising awareness and compassion for the many, many other perspectives, human, animal, plant, mineral, microbial. Amen. Quieting our loud perspective. Yeah, you know, that terrible quote, opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one and they all stink. And so we have to, yes, use your voice. Yes, our opinions matter. But also, we must not become totalitarian, right? Or else we're falling to the same trap of patriarchy, which we are opposed to. So as we shed these old models that have oppressed us, it's very important that we don't recreate the oppressive models within our new paradigm. And so I think the number one lacking thing, and I forget who said this quote, I just read it a couple weeks ago, the number one killer is lack of empathy. You know, and I think that we are severely lacking empathy, especially you know, within the whole social media culture. It's very easy to disregard other people's perspectives. It's very easy to block other people. It's very easy to kind of project onto others as demons and reject them. And yet, where is the empathy and where is the compassion? And that does not mean the same thing as enabling abuse, right? That doesn't mean you allow someone in your field who's going to be toxic or painful to you, but it does mean how can we hold compassion, right? So I'm thinking a lot about how we, in the last decade, let's say, criminal justice reform has been something that I think is on all of our hearts and minds. We know that drug addiction especially needs a certain amount of mental rehabilitation, right? Not just throwing someone away as a criminal, as fucked and broken for the rest of their life and discarding them, right? So we're speaking of criminal justice reform, and we need empathetic new models within the legal system, right? We also have within the legal system that, you know, these, what are they called? Non-disclosure agreements where people sue for sexual assault and rape and things like this. And then the person, if they are powerful and they have a lot of money, they suppress the woman, they suppress anyone who tries to challenge them because they have enough money to do so, and that causes suppression of awareness. And so within that, we have a broken legal model. But we also have to retain that we cannot discard everything, right? Because that's the same model that helps us to find truth and justice. It just needs reform. It needs help, right? So we don't necessarily want to create a drug society, right? So people who do heroin, right? They are self-harming and they need help. They don't need chastisation and shame and rejection and being isolated, right? And if that's true, then how can we build a model socially and culturally where we also encourage these transformative aspects to grow in all of us? Jebuya Langatsu says, do I know what twin flames are? You know, soulmates, twin flames. I'm really still kind of struggling with these two ideas and not only questioning where the validity is within each of those paradigms, but then also realizing that it can be a setup for projecting, in the sense that you're my twin flame, you're my twin flame, you're my twin flame, you have to be, is extremely stifling. And so how do we know what that feels like? And so I think, I don't know if I'm correct, because really it's just a philosophical, spiritual idea, right? Twin flames maybe are two like yin and yang that come together and they just grind on each other and they purify each other. And if there's tools, if there's community around that, if there's the ability of healthy communication and honesty and sincerity and empathy, then maybe that can be a cauldron for evolution and growth and doesn't have to be a horrible explosion. Maybe then soulmates are people who meet each other from past lives and recognize these connections, and it is beneficial or integral. So I don't know. What do you think? Isabel says, to that quote you quoted, it's better to be yourself poorly than be someone else well. Yeah, that's another version. I've not heard of that. It's better to be a first-rate yourself than a second-rate somebody else, is how Buhner said it. Oh, Kayla says, one soul that has split into two. Well, this is a really interesting thing because according to alchemy, there's the body, the soul, and the spirit. And the spirit is the consciousness, right? The spirit that moves through all things. But the soul is the individual imprint. And so what you're saying is like one individual imprint can kind of break into two and mirror. And I believe we live in a world of mirrors, and everybody's mirroring things. And it's very easy to, when mirrors come up, it's very easy to say, no, that's actually not me, it's you. And how do we create 50% responsibility for when mirroring occurs? And then in that responsibility comes the greatest chance of transformation. So I will consider and contemplate the idea that one soul has split into two, but I almost feel to challenge that because soul is actually non-binding, and to the degree that soul expands, it becomes one with spirit. And so is there really one soul that is split into two, or one soul that is split into cajillions? And how do we define that, and where do we find our edge spiritually when there's no body? Do we? And I think like something like psychosis, right, is hyperextended telepathy. And so when you're walking in the park and you maybe have schizophrenia or psychosis, right, you hear other people's thoughts, and you don't know how to discern between your own individual mind and everyone else's. And that's like porous boundaries. That's a porous sense of self, right? And that's what drives people to being completely overwhelmed and psychotic episodes. And so how do we then open the sensory gating channels to the degree that we still have a boundary around our sense of self and our aura, know our values, know how energies feel when they're coming in, know how to not take on other people's suffering or energies, but also how to listen and how to be empathetic and receptive to letting people finish sentences and chewing on things and really taking the process to hear others out. And so one soul that is split into two or three or five or 25, I wonder. Dream Awakening says, I had a tree that was my best friend as a child. People think it's crazy, but it's true. Most people, I think, that are probably going to see this had a best friend that was a tree. So you're amongst all your weirdo friends. Rivka says, children are more instinctual than adults. I totally agree. We beat instinct and intuition out of children due to fear, due to the culture of fear. Individualizing without separating from the collective, says Novel Rover. Yeah, and that's like Jung talked about the individuation process, and so that's very similar. But we've created almost a sense of totalitarian egotism, right? Our society is about, being the baddest ass, self-aggrandizing, I have all this, like I saw this other meme that's like, what was it? Post on Instagram that you have a workshop to get rich, and then people sign up for it, and then you get rich, and then you post videos bragging about how rich you are. So hopefully you get that. Hopefully that made sense. Rivka says, demons deserve compassion too. All beings does not mean only the angelic. Yeah, and then when we bring the idea of demon down into this physical world, is Donald Trump a demon, right? Is Donald Trump an alien? Is Donald Trump whatever? Or is he a misguided person who's had tremendous trauma and abuse and confusion and misguidance in his life? And those are two very different ways of addressing it. And if he indeed is a demon or a lizard being, then you kill your enemies. But then there we are. That's patriarchy. That's exactly what you hate, right? So then how do we say no thank you? Not no and therefore I'm going to kill you, but no thank you, right? And then is there room in there for even demons to transform into angels? And they're capable of alchemy too. And so the demon world is the shadow world, and within there are our traumas, and if we can dust them off and we can process through them, they also become light. They also become well and whole again. And that's the process of reintegration. So open the closet because you think there's a monster, right? So I like this metaphor of when I was little, I always used to check in like the bathroom and not always, but I would check like in the shower, and I would check in my closet because I watched like scary movies and shit, and that's really dumb when you're like 12 years old. But I was one of the youngest cousins, and so we saw like Jason and stuff like that, and Friday the 13th. And so there's always a sense of like, this is a metaphor. So when you finally get the strength to look and open it and face it, you realize it's not there. But if you don't, then you might create a bigger and bigger monster in your mind. And so I think that's how the unconscious is if we can go in there, the demon, the monster that's 20 foot tall, to the degree that we open the door, actually becomes just a wounded child that's trying to speak a traumatic event, instead of a big scary monster. So, of course, we see in Buddhism, Padmasambhava, who was a shaman, took the forba, the dagger, the holy dagger, and he bound the demons of Bonpo, right, into the new religion. And so there's these metaphors all across our culture which talk about transmutation of demonic force into light. And if you don't realize it, we are in that to a T, as far as Donald Trump and so many others. The totalitarian dictatorships that are arising all over the world right now are sort of an embodiment of the demonic force, if you want to call it that, or at least the conversation collectively about how do we discern between someone who's a demon and someone who can be transmuted through a process of discovery and discussion and consciousness and awareness and the legal system and social conversation and social justice. And it's all happening right now. So these are like archetypal, dark figures coming into the world saying that, is this how you want to do things in the world? And hopefully we're saying, hell no. No, it's not. Elena says, my 2-year-old boy just looked at you and said, Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho. Planta Claus, That's why I got suspenders. I have red suspenders because I'm also getting fat because I eat a lot of fat. And so I'm just going to be Santa Claus, I guess. Somebody's got to do it. Jabuya Langatsu. Twin flame is male and female parallel dimensional identity. Maybe. And if you have that experience, then it's very important and valid. And Rivka says, why not unify yin and yang within the self instead? Well, I agree with everything except for instead. Because both at once seems to be the process that we're going through. So individuation or integration is that we have the Ida and the Pingala within us, right? And we channel the masculine and feminine to be unified within us. And so if anybody saw someone, I Dream I Am asked me about Tantra the other day, and so I was trying to kind of explain that like the tantric metaphors for physical sexuality are often archetypes, metaphors for this inner transformation of male-female energies within ourselves. And to the degree that we can integrate those aspects is to the degree that we will be whole, and then maybe a partner can meet us also more whole instead of trying to create that together, which seems to be very passionate, very intense, but often very hard and very hurtful. So, but that's the mirroring process, and then we learn and we grow, and then we take it within, and hopefully we alchemize that and find more integration of yin and yang within ourselves, restate our balance, interact with the world, keep digging and keep processing. And ideally, the mirrors can be non-judgmental, non-aggressive, non-mean, supportive, insightful, respectful of boundary, able to integrate, also able to do the work, and also able to call you out on your shit in a way that doesn't feel hurtful or painful. So that's hard work, but if we can do that, then that's the goal, I think. Jebalu says, that would create union or reunion with your twin. Maybe. I mean, many monks integrate within and they don't feel like they need an external twin. So we all seek our equal in this life. We all seek, or most of us, unless you're a celibate monk and that's really your path, everyone seeks that yin and yang, that divine union. And good luck. Good luck, because I hear a lot of stories. There's a lot of painful heartbreak out there. And I feel like that's from us not being able to do some of the work that we need to do in order to be healthy. Holistic Hearted Mama, what's up? She says, sometimes I wonder if we ache for a twin soul when it's really the divine connection with spirit. Yes. Shit, hold on, I pressed a button. Okay, comment please, go away. I don't know how to get that back. Let's see, I'll just go for it anyway. Now your words are over my face. Okay. Wow, this is really great. There's all these questions, but what you guys are saying is so insightful. Sometimes I wonder if we ache for a twin soul when it's really divine connection with spirit that we once had, and we search for it in others through this life, where we can find it because spirit is E. Spirit is E. Everywhere. Purusha and Prakriti acted out in relationship longing, I guess. Yes. This is Shiva and Shakti, right? Where do Shiva and Shakti unite? Right? So the Ira is on the left side, and the Pingala is on the right side. The Ira is the moon, and the Pingala is the sun, right? And through things like pranayama, through yoga, right, the goal is to actually channel those energies, balance them out, right? You can tell your alternate nostril, right? When they're balanced, the energy is more in the Sushumna, or the central channel where the chakras are. And as this flows through, right, you get to the third eye, and that's only two petals, the ajna, right? And the two petals are Shiva and Shakti. And then when they merge, they're in union. They're in sexual union, which causes the amrit to flow. And that's the whole thing. So we all are maybe on different places in our journey, right? Different souls carry different karmas. And so if we have the taste of seeking that union is actually self and God, right? This is Rumi in a way. You know, I'm drunk on the taste of the divine, right? I'm making love with the union of the divine. This is kind of the deeper work here, and we're pulling ourselves into that, and we're trying to find the traditions, and we're trying to break out of, you know, the, what would you call it, the nuclear family role that says no, like the only way to God is through the priest or the institution, right? And now we're looking at how do we unify the yin and yang. Well, you need a map first. There's esoteric maps, right? Otherwise, we don't even have a consciousness map to talk about these things. So we're digging into the historical, you know, understanding to try to find these maps so that we can do this work. And how do I make the comment thing go away? Now all of your comments, like it's allowing me to type. Let's see. I'm going to press some buttons real quick. Let's see what that does. Does nothing. Oh, there we go. Okay. We're back. So, you know, unify yin and yang instead, right? Within instead. And it's like, I also want to do that with a mirror, you know, with another, with a partner. I think we all have that kind of union longing. And the union for God and the union for the sacred partner ultimately are one anyway, if it really works. I don't know if it does. Let's see here. What great questions and comments. Thank you for being so knowledgeable and insightful, everyone. Be Healing says, in my personal opinion, we are a balance of male and female energies. And I think each person has different ratios, you know, and that's where like all the different, you know, hetero to, you know, gay can really be expressed with, we all have a different combination of masculine and feminine energies within ourselves. And we are mirrors of the universal creator. Our mirror is God, and that is what we see in others, God. Amen. And also, self and other, right, is self and God, right? And if you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all, says Yogi Bhajan. So if we could truly see God, you know, and even Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, his number one student, which brought yoga to the Western culture. We all know of yoga because of Swami Vivekananda, who was Ramakrishna's student. And Vivekananda met him and was very rational, and Ramakrishna was out of his mind. I mean, he was nuts. He was just in samadhi all day, laying around. And so Vivekananda challenged him, and he said, have you ever seen God? And Ramakrishna said, yes. And he said, prove it to me. Or something like that. And basically Ramakrishna's response was, that you're here. You're this. There's nothing else that changes, right? But it's the perspective that changes. And so we are a balance of male and female energies. And I believe, right, so if you're on the masculine side, the goal is to integrate the feminine. If you're on the feminine side, the goal is to integrate the masculine. And to the degree that we do, we can be embodied in principles that serve and the flexibility, you know. So when someone is aggressive and wants to fight you, you have two options there. You have to masculinize and fight them, or to feminize and to disarm. And those are the balance, if we have all that within ourselves to explore. Rivka says, what about self-aggrandizing to make fun of self-aggrandizement in a manner that is humorously enough to shed light on society's propensity for such? That's called trolling, I would consider. And I would just suggest most people self-aggrandizing on social media are not doing it to make fun of self-aggrandizement. They're doing it for likes. And so, yes, I am all for humor. Sometimes I get a little scared of humor because of the cultural sensitivity that we're living in right now. So I had this really humorous idea. For a while, I was taking pictures of myself or others and then putting all those really stupid images and like putting wigs on and sunglasses and this and that. And I find that I'm afraid that people might take that as antagonistic. And so I had this idea of like, let's take it a little lighter and let's do a make fun of your selfie challenge, right? How funny is that? Like, it cracks me up to tears. But I don't want then anybody saying like, oh, you're making fun of me, or like, you know, there's so much to deal with there. So trolling is a very difficult thing, and I'm not a troll. I'm more of the, you know, just express what I am and be here. And then there's also like, what's that? I'm not remembering that guy's name, who said ponies should be ID cards. Vermin Supreme, so he's a troll, right? Ali G, whatever that guy's name is, Sacha Baron Cohen, he's a troll. And so if you can find a way to self-aggrandize, to make fun of self-aggrandizement, but then like, you know, it's kind of like here's my six-pack. I'm just making fun of like myself with my six-pack, but you're still also just like putting your six-pack out there. So how do we balance? You know, I think it comes down to like self-acceptance and self-embrace and embracing who we are and what we are, but not taking it to our head and becoming sort of egotistic about it. That's the balance that, you know, I'm seeking. But you can totally try to self-aggrandize in the humor of self-aggrandizement. And really, like, everyone do whatever you want, you know. It's just a matter of, like, what is the energy, what is the circle that you want to wake up to? You know, a whole bunch of people that are self-aggrandizing to make fun of self-aggrandizement, or a whole bunch of people who are feeding each other and talking about plants and nature and ecology. Like, you know, everything is fine. Holistic Hearted Mama says, oh, time restrictions. I forgot about that. We didn't even get to the questions. Purusha and Prakriti acted out in relationship longing. Yeah. Unity within, unity without. Hey, Emna Woods, many blessings. What yoga did I practice? So, I only have 1 minute left. Maybe I'll just start this over. Let's see. If anybody wants to jump back on, I'm going to save this one and start another one. Thank you for the conversation. We'll continue in a minute. Come back.